little pump gauge that could. It's a little misleading title, but Kyle's the one who made it, so blame it. I'm Stephen Hilt. I'm a senior threat researcher at Trend Micro. Did this project with Kyle, who can't be here, so if you don't like anything, it's his fault. If you like it, it was totally me. So we're going to go into it and do a little background. I think everybody in the room knows probably where the industry is in this current state. This isn't really about where we are in security. This is more about where we are in identifying threats towards infrastructure, critical infrastructure, non-critical infrastructure, and ICS devices in general. It's a Yeti, so anybody can name why I put a Yeti up there? Is Crouchy Yeti. So as we started looking around, you can see that even things that we observed were SCADA system rats are being traded in underground forms. And then devices, much like this Eater Guardian AST, and this is the primary focus of this talk here, is this device which sits on a gas station, petrol station, and monitors the tank levels and other things, gallons, water, that's the water content of the gasoline, the temperature, Fahrenheit, and the elevation of the tank and how much is in it. So why attack SCADA? The government will want to, as Kim has mentioned in her talk previously. Criminals may want to do it for criminal activities. And also, it's just easy. So, Guardian AST, what is it? I just kind of explained it, but there's the way it really works is there's usually a dispatch station. I'm sorry, that's really, really blurry, and it says text over here. That's awesome. So the way it works is, for example, you are dispatching gasoline or petrol at your stations, and eventually they're going to run out. So this system is designed for the main company who fills these stations to automatically read this and know that, hey, I need to dispatch said product to that station. These are fine, so I don't need to refuel them. So these things started becoming popular for the automation purposes of making that less of a manual process. And in a lot of cases, these are around and you don't see them on the internet because it's still a manual process. An operator once a day of the facility will look at it, type it, and then call up and say, hey, we need X or more of it. And then there's this website, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, it's called Shogun. I barely even use it. This is a little video of how you can find these easily on Shogun. And then you can connect to them pretty easily. They run on port 10,001. John wrote a really good, pretty quickly right after H.D. Moore released some of the original findings around these devices, had a script up and working and was indexing the devices themselves. So you can see we connected to one on the internet. This is for research purposes, don't do this really. You can run a couple commands. I think that one was the shift inventory. So not just the one that was running to do the tank inventory commands, there's a magnitude of other commands that are supported, that you can pull information from these devices. Here's one that's on the internet that I found. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee in the US. So this one's interesting to me. It's in Chattanooga. But not all tanks are equal. So it's not just gas stations. We found ones that were backup generators at hospitals and other places as well. Sometimes we found one at terminal stations, which in the US, a terminal station are the big tanks, in which your trucks will come to at the end of the pipeline. That's where the gasoline is then dispatched out from there. They mix the right quantities with the right additives at the terminal station and put it on a truck and take it to the individual place. This is a biodiesel. It's odd when you look at it, you go, why is there 3 biodiesel tanks? That's fairly interesting because when you look at it, it's a terminal station. It's the Google Street View of that facility, and there's 3 tanks. And they're not little tanks, those are pretty big tanks. So these devices are what we would consider non-critical infrastructure. The reason why is they do monitoring of gas and tanks, not necessarily. And I know that transportation is a critical infrastructure and oil and gas is a critical infrastructure. However, I would classify this device as something that is a non-critical infrastructure device. And if you want to argue with me, that's fine, we'll do that later. So in 2013, Kyle had an original research project in which he made a ICS honeypots that mimicked water facilities. And those specifically were a critical infrastructure honeypot to mimic a critical infrastructure device. So when we went down this road, we actually wanted to find out what was going on to the non-critical infrastructure devices. Are people looking at them? Are people attacking them? What's going on? And then H.D. Moore published some findings about the Guardian ASTs that are internet facing. There are software. We wrote a software-based honeypot. It's all written in Python. We wanted to create better understanding around tax of the gas pump monitoring systems. This is kind of an evolution of the original project and some other projects we've been working on that are kind of looking towards gas pumps and as that things, but that's another story for another day. This entire project came out of our original blog post where we observed an attack against it wasn't really an attack, it's a defacement, where allegedly anonymous changed a tank name of a tank in, I think it was in Maine, to say, "We are Legion." And when I say anonymous, we don't know it was, we don't know it was not. The honeypot we wrote is completely virtualized. It does not require Guardian AST. It does not, most of what we ran them on were Raspberry Pis. It is a single Python script. Since its original release in August, there's been some changes. It now reads from a configuration file, and it has actually been accepted and merged into Conpot itself as well. I wrote it to accept 6 of the, I don't remember exactly the total number of commands, but it will accept 6 commands from the meter routine. We deployed them, this is the basic architecture of the way the system works. It's a overly simplified version, honeypot. We log to a local file. We do not send the information offsite or anything like that. I didn't want extra services, extra ports, anything like that open. So it's designed to look and act like it is a real device. And so what happens is the attacker connects to the gas pot, which is the name of the honey pot that we named, and through the magical cloud of the internet, anything that he does, his initial connections are logged locally. Any commands that he successfully implements, or even if he fat fingers typos, types in other things, everything's logged. We deployed these in the following countries: the US, in Brazil, in the United Kingdom, in Jordan, in Germany, in the UAE, and in Russia. And the total, I believe, was 12 honeypots in total in these 7 countries. So we're going to talk a little bit about the code considerations while I was building what we designed the code to do and why we did it in the way we did it. One of the problems with honeypots is that as services like Shodan become more popular, the more honeypots you install, the more they look exactly the same. And some of you may know the nation state of Chattanooga, which is me, I was doing some research last year on writing some of the in-map scripts that I've released around Siemens S7. And I went to Shodan and I was reading through some Siemens S7 stuff because John had implemented the SCADA Strangelove PLC scan into Shodan. So they were already there, but I was trying to make sure my script worked, not only on the S7-300 I had, but other S7s. So I'm going through it, and I'm starting to look, and I realize, well, there's a bunch that have the same name, serial numbers, stuff like that. And then I Google searched it, and behold, it's Compot. And I'm like, well, that's safe enough to test the script against. And then ThreatStream and Bloomberg wrote a really funny article. The reason why it was obvious it was a honeypot was everything's the same. So here we're trying to randomize as much and give as much input and values as possible to make it look as different on each time you're running it than the time you ran it before, or the next time you put it somewhere else, or anything like that. So what happened was, in the original code that I released, all this information was just stuck here. You didn't actually pull it from the config file. So, as for an example, you're getting the config file, and then all those values are in the config file, as you can see over here. And these you can change. One consideration is the temperature was in Fahrenheit. We did change that when we were deploying it in other facilities outside of the U.S. And then the height matter and all that stuff. Those things need to be configured and changed based off of where the deployment is. And yes, when we released the code, we put a lot of stuff in there to randomize it. But if you're going to install it and run it, make it very specific to where you want it to be. Don't use a gas station or petrol station name of a place that's in the U.S. and you don't have it here in Sweden. It'd be a bad idea and would look stupid. And look exactly like what you don't want it to be, which is a track. We set out to see initially how attackers are also potentially collecting the information about where these systems are. So we allowed some of them to be in Shodan, and some of them we did not. As you can see, there were no gas pod instances in Jordan in Shodan, but I already told you we deployed them. We specifically did not allow them to be indexed via IP tables. So this was, the goal of this was to see how, if these were attacked, how were they attacked, and how did they collect the information about these? If they're not going to Shodan, Are they doing their own scans specifically for these devices? Showing that the attacks and the knowledge base looking for these specific systems is high. Or, and that they're not just going to Shodan and at a happenstance and went, hey, what's this? And then started playing with it. As I told you, gas pot has now been added to con pot. That's a whole lot of pots. One of the things that I didn't like about when it got introduced to con pot is, yes, they're still doing a lot of the random value generation for the height levels and volumes. But as you can see, as you can see right here in the station name is stat oil station. So that's a one hard-coded station name. So if you're going to run Compot, change that, please. And also you want to change premium, these unleaded and super, because I don't know what you exactly call that wherever your deployment is, but do some research, or if you're going to deploy it in other places as well. So luckily right now, based off of when I made this presentation, there are no stat oil stations. So nobody's really running Compot yet with them. You have to select a template specifically for the Guardian ASTs. It's not in the default template of Compot. So you have to want to run this in the template. So after these had been deployed and sat and watched, we pulled in the logs, we correlated the logs, we then started determining what we were going to classify as an attack versus not an attack. So what an attack was not when we were reviewing this information for context, when we're going to talk about attacks in a little bit. What they were not, we did not classify port scan as an attack, a telnet, and then nothing. That's just a connection. I'll go through some of the statistics around some of these informations, but we did not say they were an attack. Server fingerprinting, banner grabbing, and just fat fingering, and there was some fat fingering as well. It's kind of funny to watch what people were trying to figure out. What they were successful commands resulting in a possible failure, which is, we'll talk about potential attack scenarios in a little bit, and that will make a little bit more sense. Targeted malware, and DOS attacks and DDoSes. And this is what we wanted to classify as an attack. It's not saying we saw these, and this was what we saw. This is what before we were reviewing the logs, what we were going to classify as. So let's talk about some of the attacks. Attack scenarios that we could come up with, and if you have any more, let us know, because it's kind of fun to talk about this kind of stuff and what other people might want to do to the system versus what was in my mind when I was doing it. The first one would be a DDoS attack. The DDoS could potentially bring the inventory control to and distribution of gasoline to a standstill. Because if you can't read from the device knowing that you need to get more of it, then you don't dispatch it, the more gas. You could change the pump names, resulting in incorrect fill into the tank. So, as an example, we would change the tank name that said unleaded. We could change it to diesel. Now, would they put diesel in the unleaded tank? That could cause a lot of problems. We could change the pumping volume, resulting in an underfill or overfill. One would think this wouldn't happen because somebody sitting there filling up the tank would realize it's spilling out overly. Or a state-sponsored attack, meaning the pump compromise to siphon the data off as a potential espionage business deal. Say a country who likes to do this kind of stuff in other industries, maybe looking into getting into the oil and gas space and wants to devalue the company right before a business deal so they can make better, a better requirement. So the attacks that we actually saw once we started reviewing the information was we actually had 4 pump modifications, 12 pump identifications, and the identifications exclude scanning services that we knew about, such as Shodan, the PLCscan.org guys, who were looking for these as well. And we also saw 2 DDoS attacks. And this is a breakdown of by which country. The U.S. is higher because we deployed more of them, because obviously Kyle and I live in the U.S. With one consideration that when we were deploying these, we deployed them in a manner of which we did not use any virtual IP space. We actually bought IP space in these countries, so there are no Amazon clouds, none of that. These are local IP addresses in that region. Had a Raspberry Pi, we shipped them to people we knew, colleagues, coworkers, other things like that, who could deploy them and help us out on that situation. An attack breakdown is the number of attacks, and then our the originating company of which the attack is coming from. So from the U.S., Russia, China, Romania, China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Mexico, and Canada. Given the fact that a lot of these may have been VPN addresses as well. So the connection attempts was kind of interesting. As I said, we did not classify this as an attack. So a connection attempt is potentially a scanner that we didn't know about based off of some of the information. So we saw 58 gets, 39 helps, and 112 of just carriage returns. So somebody was getting it. But as an attacker, what you would normally do is you tell that to a system that you find an open port on, and you just hit enter to see if you get any prompts. Or you type help or get to see if you can get anything. And get a prompt because like when you connect to Cisco, you type help, you get the banner of the help message if you get a successful connection. Out of the 6 commands that GasPod supports, this is a breakdown of what commands we actually saw that were entered. 33 of the I20100, and that is the list tank inventory, the command that Shodan uses, and the one that was specifically mentioned in H.D. Moore's research that he published in January of this year. So as we expected, that was the highest number of attempts that we saw. The I20200 command, that itself is the shift inventory report. The 300 command we didn't see any of. 400, 500. This one down here is the interesting one. The S versus I, the S is set. So this set here is specifically to set the tank names. Now, we generalize this with 200 at the end. However, this last number, the last 0, will actually, if you run this command on it, it will rename every tank. Because the 0 in the last octet is telling me every tank. Like if you run 20101, that'll list you only one tank, the first tank. 2, 3, 4, and however many ever tanks they have deployed. So don't run this command unless you want to change all the tanks. On GasPod, don't ever run these commands on real ones deployed. Legal clause, legal clause, legal clause. So when you're doing, and there's a lot of fun things you can do in other commands that are supported in the manual that Vita root gracefully, nicely put out on the internet for us. All of the commands that were entered, everything was done based off the manual. It was a very detailed manual, so I read the manual, all the commands and everything were designed and built around what the manual said we could do. From somebody who told me is that you can change the volume. Somebody told me you can change the volume. It's actually in the manual as well. You can change the volume of the tanks, which if you change the volume to 0, it'll make the system go offline. It requires a reboot, because apparently you can't divide by 0. So when they're trying to calculate the actual height of it, yeah. Math's hard. So I want to do a little breakdown between Kyle's 2013 project of the critical infrastructure versus our 2015 project. It was deployed in 8 countries in 2013. We deployed in 7 countries. Total number of 12 deployments. We had 10 deployments in this one. He had observed 74 attacks in 1 year, where we saw 18 in 6 months. So obviously, this system is less probed, attacked, and looked at than the critical infrastructure. There's a couple theories on why this is, and I actually expect it to go up over the critical infrastructure as well, because if you're wanting to get into figuring out ICS devices, knowing the legal ramifications of if I went against a water facility, nuclear plant, power plants, anything like that, the legal ramifications are higher than if I go after a gas station nobody cares about. So that's one reason why I believe you'll see more of the quote unquote non-critical infrastructure devices being probed and attacked more in the upcoming futures. This is a video, real quick, of it works. Of identifying a gas pot instance. So you scan it, you tell them that to it. So the previous video I showed you of it doing it real time. This is in comparison to the actual gas pot system. So you can see what it looks like as well. You see the response, everything looks exactly like the one that was a real one. Which, you shouldn't really do this in real ones, but I wanted to compare the two and show you that everything we tried to do was make this as realistic as possible, so it didn't appear to be a trap. Because, with Compot in specific, how many Siemens PLCs are in Modbus and other protocols that they support on one instance of that. So it's good. I'm not going to bash Compot. It's a good system, but it needs a lot of tweaking for you to run it and get realistic results to determine if people are trying to attack that device, whether you be an owner who wants to know if people are specifically trying to attack me, or so on and so forth. So, okay, sorry. So we're going to talk about some of the intelligence before I get into some of this. Anything I talk about attribution-wise of the attacks, with the caveat that attribution is really hard. We're not 100% sure of anything. That this information is just based off the available information to us, based off the a few indicators that we had, as well as some other things as well. So one of the first attacks we're going to talk about is the Syrian Electronic Army. Does anybody know Syrian Electronic Army? So the Syrian Electronic Army, or SEA, came around in about 2011. They are backers of President al-Assad. They mostly are known for performing DDoS attacks, defacements, malware distribution, spamming, and generalized mischief towards people who do not support President al-Assad. They are best known for their defacements of CBS, AP, NPR, BBC, Al Jazeera, etc. They like to go after the media. So we have a DDoS attack that we observed, actually, too, as we said, that was performed over 2 days. It was roughly 2 gigabits per second. Took our system offline, and it wasn't even Vita root, it was a Raspberry Pi. So Vita root would actually take less to knock it offline. It was a fragment packet attack. It was performed specifically on one of our gas pots in Washington, D.C. And we believe, based off of some research, that it's probably using LOIC, which is a little orbit ion cannon, a tool that Anonymous released for DDoSing. The reason why one of the first indicators that we can point to is the one that says up there, it says SEA can go. Now, after we originally released this at Black Hat, I believe it was Vice motherboard reporter actually contacted SCA and they denied this, which is fine. So here's some IP addresses if you want to write it down or take a picture of possibly Syrian Electronic Army IP addresses based off of some other things we observed, but these were specifically the ones that were used in the DDoS attack. There's several more that we didn't list. Now, SCA usually likes to really talk about things they do, but they didn't do anything about this. Could be a false flag. We also don't know, because we didn't have other things deployed in the same IP range, that the DDoS may have just been on a subnet we were on. And we got caught up in it as they were sweeping by. It could have been, not 100% sure. One of the next attacks we're going to talk about is one that we saw from the IDC team, or the Iranian dark coders. This is a group operating out of Iran. It's a very pro-Iranian group. They are best known for website defacements, information sharing. They have a really good forum where they talk amongst themselves. And most of that forum is about how can you, a lot of it's like help on. I've seen a lot of how to install Ubuntu topics and stuff like that on their forum. They will trade malware on it as well as their hacktivists. So they modified the pumps themselves, which shows an interesting attack that they knew enough to change the tank names. That hasn't been publicly disclosed. I mean, it's in the manual, but it wasn't in H.B. Moore's research. We've never said that here's the command to do it. They attacked the 2 honeypots we had installed in Jordan. Both of them were defaced. And again, can't tell you for 100% sure that this is the IDC team. Now, I believe Ali tried to actually reach out to him on our behalf, and we've never heard back. So I can't confirm or deny based off of that. So if anybody knows the IDC team, let us know. So the first one that was changed, as you can see, Tank 1 was changed to hacked by IDC team. Okay, that's interesting. The second one that was changed to they actually messed up and then blanked that out, because if you type the command to change that tank name with no appending names, it'll just delete what's there. Then they went and tried on tank 3, they changed it to Ahad was here. Okay, so, being the good researchers we are, we go to the standard place where everybody does all their research, which is Google, and searched Ahad was here. This is a defacement from the IDC team that's on Google, on that page, website, I think it's still there. It says, hacked by IDC team, and Ahad was here. So that's kind of interesting. Again, it could be a false flag. Somebody could be trying to make it look like it was the IDC team. We don't know. That would be interesting. So the IDC team also, if you look on their forums, this is specifically about Ahad. Heck, he's hacked. I've hacked. Hack hacks. We've hacked it. Hack it. This is bio. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Now government jobs. I mean, this is his bio on the after Google translating from. This is what it translates to English. So I don't speak Swedish, so I can't put that up there. Here is a post on the IDC team's forum. They're trying to, identify and list SCADA towards themselves or what they're trying to do. So they're trying to gather information about ICS environments. This shows that there is increased growth in knowledge. And one of the very interesting things about these two attacks we saw bring in a very geopolitical attack scenario to it, if it was truly who we think it was. In the fact that Iran was going after Jordan and Syria was going after things in Washington, D.C. What the purpose of what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is gather information. As I said, I think you're going to see more non-critical infrastructure devices being probed and looked at as people try to figure out more about systems to elevate their attacks. So, it's my opinion. Take it for what it is. If you don't like it, Kyle's opinion. No. If you want to look at the code, the code's here. Google your shot. It goes to that code, I promise. It's in Compot. Again, change the names if you want it. If you have feedback, want other commands added, let me know. It's on GitHub, you can also do it yourself. Everything's in Python, well documented. You can actually find John Matherly's name in it, because he helped me on the code at one point in time with some problems I was having. In one of the first iterations, it didn't accept commands. If you in-mapped it, it fell over. Yeah. But you can never connect back to it. It made the code error out. So a lot of that stuff's been fixed, but if you find problems, let us know. I'll fix it or ask you to fix it for me. Because apparently my Python is still not that great. It's a proof of concept code that works. Compot's much more stable. I actually recommend you using Compot on that template, but change the template and the files and stuff like that. They have better handling and multi-threading of padding. They can accept multiple connections. Gaspot can only do one at a time. So if you really wanted to know if multiple people are trying to go at it at the same time, good. So you can find me on Twitter at SJ Hilt, Kyle's locale spam. That's a conveniently leaked Philip I had. Or actually Ronnie Fabello said I put on Twitter. He had that one. So
devices for your research? I mean, did you get fed up for the gas prices?
No, so what happened was...
Come a little closer.
Yeah, sorry. What happened was we were specifically looking for a project to do that was revolving around more of a non-critical infrastructure asset devices. So what we did was conveniently HD Moore from Rapid 7 released a little paper about how to find these on the internet. John Matherly started indexing them, and then we saw them being changed in the showdown indexing as well. So we knew that attacks were happening. So I wanted to write a honeypot to see if we could capture some of these attacks and figure out why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and who. So that's why that whole project was spun up. It's an interest that we wanted to look into, and it was just conveniently a hot topic at that time.
Okay, so if you think about Kim's speech earlier, are there any safety systems that could be sort of break down during, by this kind of attacks?
Is there what?
Some safety systems that you can turn to the system and do some really damage.
So in this case, exactly, there is no control of anything. This is just a monitoring system of the tank. Now with that said, chaining a couple things together, you could potentially have an issue, but it's not like I can connect to it and make gasoline spill all over the place. There's no pumps actually attached to it.
So who, in your opinion, would be responsible for the protection of the system? Is it gas station owner?
So in a lot of cases, the way these things work is the gas station has this device to talk to the terminal. So usually an implementer or that terminal station is trying to automate their system so they don't have as much lag time on refills, so the tanks don't get as low before more is dispatched to them. Now, that system can happen. What needs to happen is these things should not be on the internet, as with most anything. Because eventually, there may be some form of control, or as we've said, we can make them fall offline and you may not get gas. And if you have enough of these deployed in one city, we could potentially cause a shortage in that city.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.